Hey, how's it going everyone, and welcome back to my series, Which Game is Better? If you are new here and unfamiliar with Which Game is Better, basically what I do is take two games from the same genre and rate them in 4 different categories, which are story, gameplay, open world, and presentation. In each category, there will be 3 different points that I will display now on screen, and whichever game I feel does that particular topic better, I will award a point. At the end of the video, we will have a final score, and that will determine which game I think is the better game. A quick disclaimer before I start the video is that this video will contain no spoilers other than just the premise of the games, and this video is entirely my opinion, so don't take anything personally if I say something bad about your favorite game. Anyways, without further ado, Watch Dogs Legion versus Watch Dogs 2. First category up is story, and the first thing we are going to talk about are the protagonists of both games. In Watch Dogs 2, the protagonist is Marcus Holloway, an enthusiastic and charismatic hacker who joins DedSec and tries to lead them in an attempt to free San Francisco of Bloom's control. In Watch Dogs Legion, there is no set protagonist thanks to the recruitment system, obviously, so I'm kind of just looking at the characters in general. Whoever your main character is, they all have the same dialogue no matter what, and it's pretty boring dialogue at that. The characters never really display any personality or cool traits or anything like that, so a pretty easy first point for Watch Dogs 2. Next up is villains. In Watch Dogs 2, the main antagonist is Dusan Nemec, who is in the CTO position at Bloom CTOS. Nemec is a very forgettable villain and doesn't really do much. You see him quite often, and yet I have a really hard time remembering anything interesting or cool or unique about him even. He's kind of just there and doesn't really heavily impact the story or protagonist like a good villain should. In Watch Dogs 2, there's also a few side villains. The most notable is probably Lenny. She's alright, and it's kind of cool how she messes with DedSec, and quite truthfully, she's probably more of a villain than Dusan himself. There's also some other random villains that affect and shake up the story quite a bit, like the gang members of Tezga. Now, in Watch Dogs Legion, it's a very similar case in which I think the side villains from the game are actually better than the main antagonist. The antagonist from Watch Dogs Legion is the ominous hacker group 0 Day, and well, their whole storyline wasn't very good. 0 Day actually isn't present in the story much, and when they do show up, it's something really basic and forgettable. Not to mention, the ending was extremely predictable and honestly quite boring. It was pretty bad. The side villains are much better and honestly carry the game's story. Sky Larson I think is the most memorable villain for me, at least, because she's so advanced and has zero sense of humanity and is willing to do anything to try and innovate the future. So much so to the point that it's actually really creepy and honestly quite sad. Mary Kelly is another pretty good villain. She doesn't really have a totally sophisticated and methodical plan. She's kind of just a psychopath who controls an army and has enslaved thousands of people, and she just does not care. Then there's also Nigel Cass, who was meh for me. I feel like I've seen his kind of villain before a lot. In fact, he reminds me a lot of Dusan from Watch Dogs 2. He's just evil and wants to control people. Not great motivations, no development or real agenda. Just evil and wants to control people. This is a close one, but I'm going to give this point to Watch Dogs Legion because I think the side villains were a lot more intriguing and they had a lot more memorable moments for me. Don't get me wrong though, 0 Day is still not a good villain in the slightest. The final point for the story is the plot. This one is pretty easy. To me, Watch Dogs 2 is the clear winner here. It's so hard to be invested and interested in a story when there is no main character to ground the story. And that's why Legion's story struggles so much and really fails to pique the audience's interest. Sure, Marcus isn't the best character, and there were some points in the plot of Watch Dogs 2 that were uninteresting, but I'd take it over Legion any day. Moving on to gameplay, we have Watch Dogs 2 in the lead 2-1 over Watch Dogs Legion, and the first thing we're going to be talking about is combat. Both games are pretty similar combat wise. They both have that third person cover based shooter style, and both combat systems are pretty basic. Probably the main difference in combat between the two games is the variety, and this is where Legion's recruitment system actually gives it an edge. Because there are so many recruits you can play as, they all have their own unique weapons and gadgets you can use while in combat. They also have unique abilities and gadgets you can just buy from the tech tab, like the AR cloak and spider drone. Watch Dogs 2's combat is a lot more repetitive because it doesn't have the unique variety and combat opportunities provided by the Legion recruitment system, so the point goes to Watch Dogs Legion. Legion. Stealth is also quite similar in the two games. Both are pretty simple and both utilize the ability to use traps or go in and take down the enemies yourself. Watch Dogs 2 has the one-shot taser in Stealth, which was pretty cool and isn't quite the same in Legion, but it also has these weird and funny looking takedowns with a yo-yo. Legion has more opportunities to get different kinds of stealth kills. Legion has gadgets like the AR cloak that let you go invisible to sneak past enemies. There's also the spider drone that you can send in and take out enemies remotely. And there's also the unique abilities for some of the recruits that include things like gas grenades or even a swarm of bees that can be used to take down enemies in stealth. And Watch Dogs 2 just doesn't have anything like that. Not to mention there's more stealth weapons in Legion with the suppressed pistols and full arsenal of taser weapons. Legion also has more variety in the takedown animations, and the animations differ with each recruit, giving more variety to stealth. There's even uniformed access in Legion, so you can recruit a security guard and just waltz into outposts seemingly undetected. And I almost forgot, there's a crouch button. This point goes to Watch Dogs Legion. Next up is customization, and if you've seen my other two videos, I have thoroughly discussed my disappointment at the customization in Watch Dogs Legion. I thought it was a big downgrade. You could no longer purchase and customize a vehicle, you actually have to recruit someone with a car and then customize it, and all you can customize is the color. Character customization honestly wasn't that great either. I was expecting much better, and they had so much potential with the masks and weapons and clothing options, but I just didn't find it that interesting, and I hardly bothered to change every single one of my recruits' outfits because it just felt so pointless. Now admittedly, Watch Dogs 2 probably doesn't have as much customization as Legion, but just makes it so much easier and a lot more fun to do. I actually found myself switching outfits and buying cool cars as I was progressing through the game, and I never had that feeling in Legion, so customization goes to Watch Dogs 2. It is all tied up 3-3 headed into the open world category, and the first thing I would like to discuss are the locations of the two games and how well they're implemented into their respective games. In Watch Dogs Legion, we have London, which is a very futuristic, technology-filled city with self-driving cars and drones. Watch Dogs 2 takes place in a modern-day San Francisco that has implemented Bloom CTOS 2.0 into the city, and it's used to control pretty much everything electronic. This is a very tough one because I do really like the locations of both games. San Francisco from Watch Dogs 2 is a very sunny and vibrant city with lots of beautiful sights, and I just really enjoy the life and vibe of it all. San Francisco does a really good job of complementing the light tone the game has throughout the story, and it works really well. Legion's London is also great, and I really dig the futuristic cyberpunk vibe, and it also has some really great life and interaction in the city. However, this point is going to go to San Francisco of Watch Dogs 2. I just think it does a better job of capturing the tone of the game and bringing the Watch Dogs world to life. The next topic is the side quests within both games' worlds. A large struggle for the Watch Dogs series as a whole are the side quests, and I don't think any of the games have really gotten it down yet. A lot of the quests are basic filler missions that are jam-packed in the map just for the sake of being there, and they are pretty boring to play through. Legion really struggled in particular. Not only did I feel like the missions were pointless and boring in Legion, but they also just feel extremely irrelevant and pointless in the grand scheme of the story. There's no funny or memorable moments in them, and it really feels more like you're just given a list of chores that you have to go out and complete. Watch Dogs 2 is pretty similar, but I found myself enjoying the missions a bit more. Most of them had story threads attached, and it was fun hacking into an ATM and messing with people, or hacking into some villain's personal laptop and screwing with them. I genuinely had a good time on a lot of the side missions, especially the ones you could play with a friend, so another point for Watch Dogs 2. The last point is immersion, and this one pretty much goes hand in hand with the first point, which was location. I think both games have great immersion. They both do a really good job of making you feel like you're part of this world and living in it, as opposed to just skimming through and ignoring it. Both games even have small things like car radios and human interaction that make it a lot more fun and immersive to play around in. Again though, I just think overall, Watch Dogs 2 had me a lot more interested and invested in exploring and seeing everything its world had to offer, and I could spend hours on end in that game just driving around and doing whatever I wanted, when I didn't get that feeling too much in Legion, so another point for Watch Dogs 2. Moving on to our final category of presentation, we have Watch Dogs 2 with a pretty solid lead lead over Legion 6-3. And the first topic is graphics, and this is actually not as easy as a point as you may think. Now obviously Watch Dogs Legion came out 4 years after Watch Dogs 2, so there should be a huge improvement in graphics, right? Well, not entirely. Sure, things like reflections and details have been improved, especially with ray tracing, but Watch Dogs 2 still looks really great. In fact, if you compare things like the water from Watch Dogs 2 to Legion, you can tell that they somehow managed to downgrade it in Legion. Now, I'm not going to try and force the point that Watch Dogs 2 looks better graphics wise. It doesn't. Legion has sharper textures and some really great detail and reflections, but in some areas, like the water, Watch Dogs 2 still holds an edge. So while the point goes to Legion, it really is so close that it hardly matters. Same cannot be said for the performance though. I've said many times that performance in Legion is pretty bad. Sure, it's gotten better with a few optimization patches and drivers updates, but it still has issues with massive frame drops on PC and a lot of crashing issues on console. While Watch Dogs 2 runs as smooth as butter, and I hardly ever experienced any crashes or weird technical issues like that. So performance goes to Watch Dogs 2, and that brings us to our final point, soundtrack. To be honest, none of these games had amazing standout soundtracks, not for me at least. In fact, I had to look them up and actually listen to them just so I could remember what they sounded like. Again, I hate to go too deep into music because everyone has different opinions and it's just too controversial, but I personally enjoyed Watch Dogs 2's soundtrack more. It just fit the vibe and tone of the game a lot better in my opinion, so point Watch Dogs 2. So this brings us to a final score of Watch Dogs Legion 4 and Watch Dogs 2 8. Leaving Watch Dogs 2 as the better game. Again, this video is made up entirely of my opinion, and although I do strongly believe Watch Dogs 2 is a better game overall compared to Legion, if you think Legion is better, feel free to say why in the comments and we can all discuss it. I do like both games though, and I would recommend both to you, especially if they are on sale, because they are pretty fun for what they are. I hope this video may have helped you decide on which game to buy if you were unsure, and if you want a more in-depth explanation and review of both games, you can feel free to check out my individual reviews for both Watch Dogs Legion and Watch Dogs 2. I've even made a review for the original Watch Dogs if you want to check that out as well. And if you guys want to see maybe a Watch Dogs 1 versus Watch Dogs 2 next, let me know down in the comments and I'll get to work on that soon. If you enjoyed the video or found it helpful, I would really appreciate it if you left a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. We're going for that big 10K, so I would really appreciate it. If you want to play or talk Watch Dogs with me and others, please feel free to join my Discord server. The link is in the description. Other than that, thank you for watching and have a fantastic rest of your day, Assassins.